Okay, thank you for joining this conversation today, Thaddea. And as I understand it, you are currently working on board Hunter Freya as a chief officer, amongst other things, being charged of the maintenance on deck and accommodation areas and so on. But I have a little bit of background, but I'd like to hear it from in your own words, to tell us a little bit about what life is on board the vessel, what your responsibilities are, you know.
Okay. Hello, Cian. So being on board a vessel is really a unique experience. So life on board is hard, being away from your loved ones, being at sea for some time, but you'll see a better understanding of the world and the people. So you'll see human interaction varying from places to places, and you'll see how the culture and the way of life is different on a different perspective and how we should learn to respect each other. So, personally, I would say that life on board would make you really a well rounded individual. So, there are pros and cons of being at sea, but generally, it is a fulfilling profession with a definite purpose in the world. So, to transport goods. And I just believe that it needs to be for someone to be at sea. I would say it's not for everybody, but you'll never know if it is for you if you won't try. So it surely is a difficult ride, but it is a very unique kind of experience. So I'm here on board as a chief officer. So I'm in charge of the day-to-day maintenance jobs on deck, and I'm in charge of cargo and ballast operations. And I also coordinate with the engine department with the maintenance jobs. So basically, that's my overview of my responsibilities on board.
All right. And you've been working on ships for quite some time, right? You told me you started sailing back in 2011. So I guess maybe it's a little bit hard to remember at this point because I assume you're quite used to this life. But if you try to go back to that time, what do you think was the biggest transition from, not working on board a vessel and then going into that life and that career choice? Do you remember that? Have any thoughts around that?
Well, my biggest transition, or shall I say, challenge for me of working on a ship is for sure being away from your loved ones and your family.
Hmm.
So, like by the end of the day, so when you're working on a land, you'll be able to spend time with your family physically, but on board, it's definitely one thing it's definitely one of the challenging aspect of life at sea. But I just believe that different persons have different perspectives in life, and we should know if this is for us.
Hmm.
Because seafaring, sailing, it's really not an easy job. So, but you never know. Like what I've said, you'd never know unless you've tried. So it's not for everybody, but when you know that it is for you, this quite really fulfilling because we are here on board a ship trading 90% of the goods globally. It's quite a fulfilling job, I would say.
Yeah, you definitely fill a really important role. I mean, transporting goods and everything from consumer goods to cars, and now I would imagine as well probably a lot of medical supplies. We're in the midst of this challenging pandemic, so it's an important role in society. Um, how do you,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, how would you say that you allocate the time, between handling the different responsibilities that you have on board that you mentioned earlier? How much of your time goes towards the different tasks?
So, as a chief officer, planning is one of the most vital factor to be efficient in my role. So, knowing what to do in advance, planning jobs, managing people, so supervising them and managing their work and rest hours. So, personally, I see to it that I know what are the things to be done during the duration of my contract. So, and I also have this monthly calendar planner, which I write whatever jobs I'm planning ahead for the month. And in
Mm,
this company in OSM, we also have this weekly management meetings where we discuss with the other department what are the jobs for the week and other safety matters. So basically, like what I've said, to be efficient, I really allocate my time by really planning accordingly and sufficiently.
mm,
So that's it. The key is really on the planning.
yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you're working in a very proactive way. And when planning and executing, the ballast, the cargo operations, are there major changes depending on the type of cargo, or do you have like a standard set of guidelines? Talk a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, so with regards to planning and executing the ballast and cargo operations, we have standard set of guidelines as per our company policies and procedures.
Mm,
But on the other hand, we also have emergency procedures when planning, and it should be in accordance with the charters and owners' requirement. So we
mm,
always align the guidelines with our company. So depending on the cargo, so that means we have this set of standards, and we also comply with the charters and owners' requirements.
mm. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of things to take into account. I can understand, the importance, like you said, of being a good planner and looking ahead and prioritizing correctly. Um, when we're talking about safety, that's obviously one of the most important responsibilities that you have. How do you work with safety? Talk a little bit about the safety measures that you have in place, and what you put emphasis on when you're tackling the safety challenges in your everyday work.
Yeah, so in this company, in OSM, we have OSM safety commitments. So six OSM safety commitments, which are very essential to safety and which we always put emphasis on. So one is the Stop and Safe Acts, so Stop Guard Authority. So to remind everybody, so it's an example that everybody has the right to stop unsafe acts, and it is very essential that we work together in a safe manner to protect ourselves. So always, always on board, safety comes first in whatever we do. So we also have this take five, which is an informal risk assessment. So before carrying out the job to enhance safety for everyone. So to
Mm,
stop, to work, to walk through the operation, to identify the hazards, control and communicate and safely complete the operation. So OSM is really this six safety commitments. So with regards to PPE compliance, permits, risk assessments, lockout tagout, which are really in place to ensure the safety of the ship, the environment, and the crew on board.
mm.
Safety comes first always.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of parallels there between, OSM is both a maritime company and an aviation company, and both maritime and aviation have a lot in common in that sense. The proactive work with safety, but also, like you pointed out, those rules of thumb in the day to day, like take five. I really like that. It's something that's easy to apply in your daily operation, and it's a tool that can be used quite often to mitigate any risks that could be already beforehand. So, but let's talk about, you mentioned there's another commonality is that there's always a lot of standard operating procedures, and there's a lot of manuals and descriptions of how to do things. But I also assume that you've been given a lot of training on safety work, right? And also experience, of course. So, do you have an example, or could you talk a little bit about how you handle situations that might come up on the spot that are not covered by one of the manuals, and how you deal with a situation like that?
So on board the ship, so uh, there are a lot of hazards. So that's like what you've said. Something can arise on the spot which are not necessarily covered in the manual, but it is very important to handle different situations that may arise in a calmly
Mm,
manner. So we have a set of emergency procedures which we have to follow, but it is essential that on board the vessel we must always be ready in whatever it is and work together as a team and carry out actions in a safely. So I think
Mm,
that's the key because it's really unavoidable, especially if you're working on a ship and we have cargo, which is oil. So there are a lot of risk. So
yeah.
first, we need to mitigate the risk. So prevent first, and then handle different situations, whatever emergency that may arise, in a calmly manner.
Mm, yeah. The calmness sounds to be an important factor
Yeah,
here to keep your mind clear, right? Uh,
yeah.
what were you on board a ship when the COVID-19 pandemic started spreading and developing in the world?
Mm, during the start of the pandemic, I was on board my last ship and I was able to went home and I was at home also during the lockdown and I
Mm,
joined this vessel again. So now I'm here on board for more than 7 months now since I also extended. So I can say that I've been on both sides. So I've been at home and I've experienced the lockdown. So but I would say, well, I'm relieved that I was able to join back here.
mm,
Yet I would really say it has become very, very difficult for everybody. So across the globe. So not just for
mm,
seafarers, land, shore, I think everybody. So it's very devastating knowing that there are a lot of people struggling now. But
mm,
generally, we still have hope, and as human as we are, so I'm also quite relieved that I was able to join back the ship. So the
yeah,
reason I also extended is
yeah.
I know how hard and how difficult crew change is nowadays.
Mm. Yeah, it's been more challenging than it used to be in the normal world that we had before, right?
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
interesting that you've seen both sides of it. Was it? Do you think it? I guess this is a very hypothetical question, but do you think it would have been more challenging for you if you had been at sea the whole time without being able to go home? Or
Hmm. Uh, I guess if I'd stayed for maybe almost a year, it's
mm,
not just the physical, but more of the mental struggle of being on board and not being able to set foot on a land. So it's really quite different. So I would say
yeah,
it would really be struggling. So I was fortunate enough to be able to have a break and then go back again on board. So
yeah,
luckily, I'm also quite relieved that when I joined back, it was still around July. So port regulations regarding crew changes were not too strict like months
yeah,
after those.
yeah. Understand. How do you perceive that this has developed? Like now, it's been it's been over a year since the pandemic broke out, and how would you describe, the impact of the pandemic on seafarers and the uncertainty and docking, being allowed to leave the vessel? Like, is that still evolving, or do you feel like it has settled, or what's your perspective on the current situation and how it's developed up until this point?
Yeah, so with regards to COVID-19 situation and seafaring and docking and being
Mm,
allowed to leave the vessel or not. So now I'm on a VLCC tanker. So usually we don't go out, but I would say it has really become not just physical but a mental struggle
mm,
for especially for those seafarers who have really prolonged contracts. So I have a lot of friends who are in the industry. So as well as on board a ship. So with port regulations changing over time, so this COVID-19 has put seafarers around the world in a precarious situation. So with travel restrictions, more difficult access for urgent medical needs, and crew changes being suspended. So
mm,
also one of our concern on board is also the exposure to shore personnel during cargo operations, which
mm,
is sometimes impossible to maintain an absolute total isolation. So it has
mm,
became more uneasy, but the company OSM has also see to it that we always follow our COVID outbreak management plan to
Mm,
prevent any hazardous occurrences, especially during our port stay. So
mm,
we all have this temperature check protocols. So as per our company guidelines and COVID outbreak management plan,
mm.
and the
Yeah,
office is always doing follow-ups for the implementation of this one.
yeah. That's really, it's good to hear, that there's so much focus on this and so much attention on making sure that the risk is mitigated, that the people's staying as safe as you can while still being able to perform your jobs. And it's no easy challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I commend you for the work that you've done in this period. It must have been challenging. But if we look, 2020, the year behind us, COVID-19 obviously was the main focus. So, looking into the year ahead, what are your hopes for 2021, Thaddea? What do you hope happens this year, and how do you hope that it develops?
Yeah, so like everybody else in the whole world, so we always hope that all these COVID-19 situation will be over soon and for all other things to be slowly normalized again. And
Mm,
also, a lot of seafarers not have prolonged contracts, so have been stranded on board the ship and have expressed exhaustion, fatigue, anxiety. So since COVID-19 is still here and it's 2021, I really hope for the world on a global level, so the ports and the countries to not restrict seafarers and support crew changes more for
mm,
2021.
yeah, that's a good hope for the year to come. Um, what are you looking forward the most to as a seafarer this year?
Well, personally, I'm looking forward for my vacation now. So it's coming
Yeah,
soon. So after 7 months on board, so which I really intended. So I really intended to extend. So I'm scheduled to
yeah.
go home upon arrival. So probably next week, hopefully. So, and also, what seafarers do is the lifeblood of global economy. So, as what I've said, transporting 90% of the global trade. And with COVID-19, it's never really easy. So, I'm really looking forward this year for the global community to really support crew changes more.
Mm. That's a good hope for the year to come. I hope that they will take it seriously to make that possibility to happen in a much smoother way. Because, like you pointed out, I mean, you're doing a tremendous job. It's so important for the world economy and for things to go around. So it would make a lot of sense for the different authorities and governments to support you and at least, enabling crew changers in a smoother way. And hopefully that comes to fruition because now we have a lot more information about the virus as well. So it should definitely be a possible goal to reach, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, well, I thanks a lot for this conversation today. It's been a pleasure to take part in your life on board and how you've dealt with these
Thank you, Sam.
challenges. Yeah. And I hope that you have an amazing, well-deserved vacation now that you end this tour that you're on currently. So, okay,
Thank you.
bon voyage.
Thank you.